Y'all, what happened on social media last night wasn't just a live stream, it was a detonation. Within minutes, timelines froze. Group chats went silent. And fans stared at their screens in disbelief as Teyana Taylor appeared on IG Live with a look that didn't scream celebration, it whispered danger. According to explosive online claims, Teyana allegedly revealed she was pregnant, and then dropped a name that instantly turned the internet upside down. Chris Brown. No soft launch. No clarification. Just a moment so tense, viewers say they forgot to breathe. Her eyes? Heavy. Her silence? Deafening. Her expression? A chilling mix of guilt, defiance, and fearless resolve. Screenshots spread like wildfire. Clips were ripped, reposted, slowed down, zoomed in. And before the live even ended, 2 other names were already trending, not in support, but in shock. Sources claim Aaron Pierre was blindsided, allegedly telling close circles that he felt used and discarded. Moments later, reaction videos surfaced tied to Iman Shumpert, with fans interpreting his silence as betrayal too loud to ignore. Then came the hashtags. Then came the think pieces. Then came the judgment. Some called her bold. Others called it manipulation. Many asked the same haunting question: was this confession or calculated chaos? As memes flooded feeds and reaction videos exploded across YouTube, one clip replayed on loop, Teyana, eyes glossy, voice steady, allegedly saying her decision was hers alone and the truth couldn't stay hidden anymore. If these claims hold weight, this wasn't just a pregnancy rumor. It was a public emotional collapse, a career-shifting moment, and possibly the most shocking celebrity bombshell social media has seen in years. And the scariest part? The internet believes this story is only getting started.
You don't know what you did to me. Your body language speaks to me.
Buckle up. What unfolded online didn't feel like entertainment. It felt like a public rupture, the kind that leaves timelines scorched and reputations trembling. By the time the clips began circulating, the damage was already done. Screens were recording, fingers were shaking, and a narrative fueled by rumor, reaction, and raw emotion was being written in real time. Late into the night, feeds erupted with claims tied to Teyana Taylor. Viewers say the energy was different from the first second. Not celebratory. Not promotional. Heavy. A long pause. A breath held too long. Eyes locked forward as if bracing for impact. According to viral chatter, what followed was an alleged pregnancy reveal that detonated across platforms before anyone could verify a single detail. Then came the name that turned confusion into chaos, Chris Brown, dropped into the conversation by speculation, screenshots, and whispered interpretations that multiplied by the minute. This wasn't a clean announcement. There was no caption to clarify intent, no follow-up post to calm the storm. Instead, fragments took control. A clip cut too early. Another slowed down. A third zoomed into a moment fans swore showed guilt colliding with resolve. Comment sections became courtrooms. Every frame was evidence. Every silence was a verdict waiting to happen. As the rumors gained speed, 2 other figures were pulled into the blast radius, not by statements of their own, but by the internet's appetite for context. Aaron Pierre began trending alongside reaction videos that claimed he'd been blindsided. The commentary painted a portrait of emotional whiplash, that he had been drawn close, then abruptly displaced by a revelation he never saw coming. The language online was merciless, stitching speculation into certainty with alarming ease. Moments later, the conversation sharpened again when fans connected the dots to Iman Shumpert. His name surged without a single confirmed quote, powered by body language breakdowns, old interviews resurfacing, and silence interpreted as pain. In the court of public opinion, silence is never neutral. It becomes a canvas. And the internet paints fast. What made this storm particularly volatile wasn't just the rumor itself, it was the emotional math people started doing out loud. Timelines. Overlaps. Screenshots from months ago stitched together with today's shock. Influencers spoke with certainty. Reaction channels posted thumbnails drenched in disbelief. Memes turned tragedy into currency. And through it all, the alleged source remained visually present but verbally restrained, a choice that only deepened the mystery. Then came the line that keeps replaying, a moment viewers insist captured everything at once. Eyes glassy. A half smile under pressure. A statement interpreted as ownership, not apology. Those words, filtered through reposts and paraphrase, were taken as confirmation by some, defiance by others, and manipulation by the harshest critics. The same sentence was weaponized in opposite directions, depending on who was listening. The sadness in this story isn't quiet. It's loud and sprawling. Fans who once celebrated strength now argue about accountability. Supporters frame the moment as a woman claiming her truth. Detractors frame it as emotional fallout left unresolved. And hovering over every take is the same uncomfortable reality. None of this unfolded in private. It happened where screenshots live forever and pauses are never forgotten. As the night stretched on, hashtags surged. Commentary hardened. The language turned clinical, patterns, behavior, intent. Amateur analysts dissected facial expressions like forensic experts. Others demanded proof, only to share rumors 2 clicks later. The machine didn't slow down, it fed itself. And with every refresh, the alleged story grew heavier, darker, more irreversible. This is how modern scandal works. Not with a press release, but with fragments. Not with facts, but with feelings. Not with clarity, but with velocity. Once the narrative escapes into the wild, control is an illusion. By morning, millions had already chosen what they believed and what they were angry about. There's a tragedy in that. Because behind the speculation are real people, real histories, and real consequences that don't reset when the trend fades. The internet doesn't wait for verification. It waits for reaction. And reaction is what it got: explosive, emotional, and relentless. As part 1 closes, the questions hang heavy and unanswered. What was actually said? What was misunderstood? Who was hurt and who will pay the price? The feeds may move on, but the imprint of this night won't. Because once a moment like this ignites, it doesn't just trend. It scars. And if the whispers are even half true, the next chapter won't be quieter, it will be devastating. The morning after didn't bring clarity, it brought prosecution by public opinion. By sunrise, the story had evolved from a late-night shock into a full-scale digital trial. Clips were no longer just circulating, they were being dissected like exhibits. Every pause, every blink, every micro-expression from Teyana Taylor was replayed with captions that read like verdicts. The narrative had hardened overnight, not because of evidence, but because repetition had begun to feel like truth. This is where rumor becomes dangerous. Screenshots, some verified, many not flooded feeds claiming timelines that no one could independently confirm. Accounts with large followings spoke with the authority of insiders, despite never being cited. Reaction channels framed speculation as inevitability. And once a theory is treated as inevitable, denial becomes suspicious by default. The name pulling the most gravity was still Chris Brown, not because of anything newly said, but because silence became its own accelerant. In gossip culture, absence isn't neutral, it's interpreted. Fans argued whether quiet meant avoidance, respect, or something darker. Each side spoke as if certainty were already settled. Meanwhile, the emotional collateral widened. Commentary began stitching together old interviews, archived photos, and unrelated moments, reframing them through the lens of this alleged reveal. Context collapsed. History was rewritten in comment sections. What once looked like coincidence was now framed as foreshadowing. This is how narratives retroactively justify themselves. The harshest turn came when online discussions shifted from what happened to who was played. Speculation swelled around Aaron Pierre, with posts claiming emotional proximity that was never publicly defined. His name was used as proof of a pattern rather than a person. Alleged quotes circulated without sources, shared so often they felt official. The tone wasn't curiosity, it was accusation. Shortly after, the same gravity pulled Amon Shumpert deeper into the discourse. Old footage resurfaced, stripped of original context. His past words were reframed as warnings that people should have listened to. Silence again became testimony. Grief was inferred. Betrayal was assumed. This wasn't reporting. It was reconstruction. The courtroom metaphor wasn't accidental. Social media had assigned roles. Influencers acted as prosecutors. Fans became jurors. Reaction creators served as expert witnesses, breaking down body language and tone as if human emotion were a science exact enough to convict. And at the center of it all sat a woman whose actual words had been replaced by interpretations of her face. Support fractured sharply. Some called the moment an act of ownership in a world that polices women's choices. Others labeled it emotional recklessness, arguing that visibility carries responsibility. Neither side waited for confirmation. Debate moved faster than facts ever could. What made the moment tragic wasn't the rumor itself, it was how quickly empathy evaporated. Sadness became spectacle. Pain became content. The possibility that multiple people might be hurting simultaneously was flattened into a winner-loser narrative. Someone had to be right. Someone had to be wrong. Complexity didn't trend. As hours passed, the language escalated. Manipulation. Pattern. Calculated. Words that imply intent without requiring proof. Once those labels attach, they're nearly impossible to remove. Even a denial would be framed as damage control. Even silence would be framed as guilt. This is the trap of virality. The internet doesn't ask what's true, it asks what's compelling. And compelling stories reward certainty, not caution. By midday, headlines across reaction platforms no longer posed questions. They implied answers. Thumbnails screamed shock. Captions suggested collapse. The emotional temperature never cooled. behind the noise, something quieter lingered: the cost. Careers don't fracture in a single moment, they erode through perception. Relationships don't end from rumors alone, they strain under the weight of public judgment. Even if the claims dissolve, the memory won't. Screenshots don't disappear. Algorithms don't forget. And that's the darkest part of this chapter. Because if the story is wrong, the damage still exists. If the story is exaggerated, the harm remains. If the story is incomplete, the conclusions have already been drawn. As this second phase unfolded, one thing became clear: the internet had moved past waiting. It had decided. The outrage had found its footing. And the story was no longer about a single alleged reveal. It was about power, visibility, and who gets to control a narrative once it escapes its origin. Part 2 doesn't end with answers. It ends with escalation. Because when speculation reaches this level, correction becomes irrelevant. The machine keeps moving. And the next phase, responses, denials, or further silence, will only pour fuel onto a fire already burning too hot to extinguish quickly. What comes next won't be softer. It will be louder, colder, and far more unforgiving. The third phase didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with silence, and silence is where damage multiplies. By the time the internet reached this stage, outrage had matured into certainty. Not verified certainty, emotional certainty. The kind that doesn't ask questions anymore. The kind that rewrites memory and punishes hesitation. Overnight, the tone shifted from speculation to sentencing, and the story entered its most unforgiving chapter. Feeds were no longer debating if the alleged reveal mattered. They were debating consequences. At the center of it all, Teyana Taylor became less of a person and more of a symbol, projected onto by audiences desperate to resolve their own expectations. Her past was combed through again, not for understanding, but for confirmation. Moments once celebrated as confidence were reframed as calculation. Strength was recast as control. Silence was translated into intent. This is how public narratives collapse inward. What intensified the fallout was not new information, but the lack of it. No official clarification. No firm denial. No structured statement. In the vacuum, reaction creators took over. Clips were slowed. Frames were frozen. Audio was isolated and replayed until meaning was manufactured. When content runs out, interpretation steps in, and interpretation doesn't need facts. The gravity pulled outward again when attention recentered on Chris Brown. His continued absence from the discourse became the loudest presence. Fans argued whether restraint was respectful or strategic. Detractors framed it as avoidance. Supporters framed it as maturity. The truth became secondary to alignment. People didn't ask what was happening, they asked who they were supposed to side with. And sides were chosen aggressively. As the narrative hardened, collateral damage expanded. Commentary channels began warning of irreversible fallout. Not because of proof, but because perception had already calcified. Brands were discussed. Future collaborations speculated on. Career trajectories analyzed as if collapse were inevitable. This wasn't reporting. It was forecasting fueled by fear. Then came the emotional reframing. What started as a shock story became a morality play. Discussions shifted from events to character. Was this empowerment or manipulation? Ownership or recklessness? The internet doesn't tolerate ambiguity for long. It demands labels, and once applied, those labels spread faster than corrections ever could. The saddest turn came when empathy disappeared entirely. In comment sections, pain was ranked. One person's alleged hurt was elevated while another's was dismissed. Human complexity was flattened into narrative convenience. People spoke with authority about emotions they could never verify. The word deserved appeared more often than confirmed. That's when the story stopped being about what happened and became about what audiences wanted to believe. The courtroom atmosphere reached its peak. Influencers spoke like judges. Threads read like closing arguments. Screenshots were submitted as evidence without provenance. Context objections were overruled by virality. And the jury, millions strong, deliberated in public, rewarding the harshest takes with the most engagement. This is where tragedy sets in. Because regardless of what is true, something real was breaking under the weight of attention. Reputations don't fracture only when allegations are accurate, they fracture when narratives stick. Relationships don't require confirmation to strain, they strain under suspicion alone. Even silence, meant to protect, becomes a liability when the crowd demands performance. As the hours dragged on, one unsettling pattern emerged. The story no longer needed new fuel. It sustained itself. Old clips resurfaced again. The same theories were repeated with louder confidence. The cycle fed on its own momentum. And buried beneath the outrage was a quieter grief. Fans who once felt inspired now felt disillusioned. Supporters who believed in privacy felt complicit in intrusion. Even critics showed signs of fatigue, not remorse, but exhaustion from constant intensity. The spectacle had reached saturation, yet no one knew how to exit it. That's the cost of viral scandal. There is no resolution, only replacement. The algorithm doesn't seek truth, it seeks continuation. And continuation requires escalation. Each phase must feel darker than the last. Each chapter must feel definitive, even when nothing has been definitively proven. The narrative has escaped its origin entirely. It belongs to the internet now, reshaped, repackaged, and reinforced beyond recall. Whether statements arrive tomorrow or silence continues, the outcome won't rewind what has already been internalized by millions. Because once a story reaches this stage, correction becomes irrelevant. What remains is perception. And perception is permanent. The tragedy isn't just who might be hurt next. It's that no one involved gets to opt out anymore. The internet has decided this story matters, and when that happens, the truth doesn't get the final word. Virality does. This is the moment where stories stop being rumors and start becoming consequences. What you're watching isn't just celebrity gossip. It's a real-time collision between silence, speculation, and emotional fallout. Every clip you saw, every pause you analyzed, every reaction you felt was part of a machine that doesn't slow down once it's fed. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with proof. Sometimes it arrives with perception, and perception is enough to burn everything in its path. If even a fraction of these claims are true, then someone trusted too deeply, someone stayed quiet too long, and someone else paid the price publicly. And if they're not true, then this becomes an even darker tragedy, a reminder of how quickly narratives harden and how merciless the spotlight can be when it decides to lock in. What's undeniable is this: nothing about this situation is harmless anymore. Careers feel exposed. Relationships feel fractured. Emotions feel weaponized. The internet has already moved past waiting for facts. It wants reactions, sides, and endings. And it will keep pushing until someone breaks the silence, or something breaks entirely. So ask yourself this before scrolling away: who really wins when pain becomes content? Who benefits when betrayal is assumed, not proven? And how many lives get reshaped while millions watch from behind a screen? Because once stories reach this level of intensity, there is no clean ending. There's only fallout, revision, and the quiet damage left behind after the trend dies. If you think this is where it ends, you're wrong. The next move, whether it's denial, confirmation, or continued silence, will decide everything. And when it happens, it won't be subtle. Stay locked in, watch closely, because the truth, whatever it is about to collide with the narrative, and only one of them will survive.